Talk to us about the role of the DNC in this particular moment and why you sitting in this seat as DNC vice chair matters.
This bill is a big, brutal betrayal of a lot of people who were so frustrated with government that one or two things happened in this last election. You have people who said, I'm so frustrated with government. I don't like any of y'all. I'm not going to engage. And then you had people who said, the price of things are too high. Democrats had a couple of years to fix that. They didn't do it. And so let's give Donald Trump another chance. And he ran around pretending that he gave a damn about working people and working families. He went around lying about what his agenda would mean for people in their real lives. And one of the things that I'm sure I've said on the show before that frustrates me about politics, and I'm in it in an elected capacity, is that so often we treat politics like some, reality TV show or like some daytime soap opera where this person says this person says that, and then the whole conversation about what's happening is about who got the best zinger, who said the coolest thing, and like let's argue about people's personalities and why I center and have been this idea of the Democrats' message, which has to be aligned with our mission about making life better for folks, is because I encourage people to use that frame on everything that happens in politics. Just as Charles was saying in that last clip about the facts, I also want people to just think about the policy for a second. Take the personalities off and just answer these questions. Does it make life better for you or for the people you love to see them kicked off of their health care?
Nope.
Does it make your life better to raise taxes for the people in the lowest 10% of the economic bracket and then cut taxes for the highest 10%? I don't think so. And I think the same can be true about kicking your grandmama and them out of skilled nursing facilities, which people do not recognize. 65% of all people in skilled nursing facilities are there right now because of Medicare and Medicaid. And you can go down the list. And so people want to make this about personalities. They want to make this about everything else. I ask people to just make this about you. You don't have to like Malcolm. You don't have to like Donald Trump. You don't have to like the Democrats. You don't have to like the Republicans. But you do have to answer the question of what is this public policy outcome going to mean for you? And I think what the Democrats need to do in this moment is to ask that question to the American people and to make it clear why we are in this work, why we're doing this, why we're opposing what Trump is doing. Because I've heard from some folks, even some others, well, like, y'all always just against Trump. I'm against Trump because Trump wants to make your life worse. And
Right.
I'm for us because we're fighting to make folks' lives better. And I think it's going to be our responsibility to convince people of something that far too many people have made clear they are not convinced of, that government can make their lives better. And that's our job. That's our work.
And it feels like that work is getting more and more challenging, Vice Chair Kenyatta, because we're in a moment right now where I don't know if you're familiar with that book called Dying of Whiteness, but it's
I'm
a book
not.
that really, it's a really powerful book, and it outlines historically how many white voters have been willing to vote for their white interests as it pertains to racial sentiment, but those white interests are often in contravention of getting things that they need. Like one of the reasons we don't have universal health care is because when it was first introduced as a concept, there was a real belief that they would be perfectly content to have access to universal health care. But if it meant black people were going to get it too, this is coming shortly out of the enslavement era, then they weren't going to vote for it. And we've seen how people were perfectly willing to take away Obamacare, but as soon as you talk about the Affordable Care Act, oh wait, don't keep your government hands off of my Affordable Care Act. And we have seen in this society, and one of the other hosts on this channel, Clay Kane, calls it the hate speech of the Southern strategy. We have seen that, and we're in a society right now where people are willing to vote against having healthcare, against having job opportunities, against having plans for housing and healthcare. They would rather vote for a concept of a plan if it also feeds their white nationalist interests. And this is not all of them, but there is a significant portion of voters for whom voting for the hate speech, voting for the racism was a part of their electoral calculus. How does the DNC, which is supposed to be this entity that has this broad tent approach, how is it that you all are going to be able to counter that if we are surrounded by people people who include members of our population and community who, frankly, are okay without getting anything because all they watch is Fox News, and they think that this is America being great.
So, there's a lot that you said there, but I do want to hone in on the thing that you mentioned, sort of about Fox News, because I know this is difficult for us who are fans of the show, present company included, and many others. But if you do watch Fox News, people should hear what or understand what they're hearing on Fox News. Donald Trump was at the Republican conference earlier this week, rallying support for this bill among members. And he comes out to the cameras and he says, don't you fucking touch Medicare, Medicaid. And so if you look, I was just on Fox this last week and I highlighted that in the middle of the night, Republicans advanced a bill that was going to cut Medicare and Medicaid. And my comments and my private messages got filled not with the traditional, beautiful letters that I get that are full of racism, homophobia, and vitriol, but was also filled with people sending me that video of Trump where they said, no, they're not going to do that. He just said right here that he's not going to cut Medicare and Medicaid. You're lying. These are scare tactics of the Democrats. And so I think a part of what we also have to confront in this moment is that because of the stratification of our news media, we don't live in a moment anymore where everybody sat down and watched Walter Cronkite, right? And then you could debate what he said, whether you liked it or didn't like it, but we were all speaking from a same sheet of music. We got some people who are not just, we on the one and the two, they on not just the three and the four, but they ain't even know that there's a beat happening. And there's somebody who's telling them that it's not happening and to not trust your lying eyes and to not trust your lying ears. And so there has been an intentional strategy among the Republican caucus to allow Donald Trump to go out and do what he does best and lie to folks, lie to people who are desperate. Just like he spent his career lying to people who wanted to expand their career opportunities, so they joined Trump University and got a degree that was not worth the paper it was printed on. People who went into one of his casinos and were lied to about the capacity for them to actually win. And not only were they not going to win, but the damn casino went bankrupt. People who took business with Donald Trump as small contractors because he's this huge guy and this is going to be a contract that's going to change their life. And he lied about his willingness to actually pay the damn bills that he owed. And so he is somebody who's not only good at lying, but he has an ecosystem of people that are intent on spreading his lies. And let me make this final point, Dr. Flowers. He
Favors and no
Not the
doctor.
favorite. Jesus
I'm not
Christ. Sorry,
just an
Doctor.
attorney.
Um,
But I will take those flowers. I'll take
okay.
that.
Take the flowers for that JD, okay? But let me just make this point, Lurie, that when you look at what I call Dr. King's worst birthday party ever, okay, when Donald Trump got sworn in,
Mm.
you look at the folks who were lined up behind him. It was the heads of every major media entity in this country, every major uh, uh, advanced AI and tech company in this country. And so there is an intense strategy to shield people from the truth, to bombard them with lies, and to do so with a velocity and ferocity that makes it difficult for people to know what to trust. And so that's a big part of this. And it's why the DNC has set up our new war room where we have, and this part people won't care about, but it's important in terms of how we do our work. Our traditional media folks and our online media folks, they were not a part of the same structure before. And
Right.
so you know, having run complex organizations, that the how you do business internally matters in terms of how people experience it externally. And so there's a lot of work that Chair Martin and this leadership team is doing to try to bring some of those verticals together so that we can respond to the lies that come out so fast and furious. And so that was a long answer long, but
No, but it's important, and the idea of you being on Fox News. While I know it was probably trying on your spirit in the aftermath, I think it's really important. Pete Buttigieg, really powerful communicators, and not the only two, but I think it is important to have your voices in those spaces. I couldn't do it; go with God.
Yeah.
But it is important to have people who are going to be able to be in those spaces to disrupt the constant onslaught of news. Maybe being exposed to the truth might do something to allow the voters who are voting against their economic, their healthcare, their education and job and housing interests in
Yeah.
favor of voting for whatever internal sentiments the MAGA cry will give them. Maybe it will help pierce the bubble a little bit. I'm certainly hopeful of that, because I think as long as people are not able to just stay in their intellectual bubbles, then when their healthcare gets taken, we can say, well, this is exactly what Representative Kenyatta told y'all was going to happen. In fact, we have the email that you wrote him that showed sending a video of Donald Trump saying it wasn't going to happen. So you knew that the contrast was here. And that's important. And yet I
Yeah.
also think that it's going to be so important for members of the Democratic Party to figure out how to message to people who are being messaged to by a Southern strategy, tactic, and
Oh, for
approach.
sure, for sure.
You mentioned the war room that you all are in, and it has seemed to some, and that's one, I like the language. I like the aggressive framing of a war room. It feels like we're
Yeah.
actually in the fight, and by we I mean people who have something to benefit, whether you consider yourself a Democrat or not. You are a part of this society, and when resources are taken, they get taken from all of us, not to the same degree, but they get taken from all of us. But it has, using the phrase war room, it has felt to outside observers that you all in the DNC have had a bit of a structural war internally. We've had David Hogg on this show before, and recently, after he became the third of the three DNC vice chairs to be elected, as I
Mhm.
understand it. And he talked about the fact that as a member of the DNC leadership committee, he also felt that he should be able to engage in a leadership of another organization that was also going to include, as a part of its effort to unseat Republicans, a primary operation as against Democrats that he and this group will determine are not doing enough. Now, I asked him about the framework and the rubric that they were using in that group to determine which Democrats should be primaried, which should not. He didn't really have a firm answer. And then in the aftermath of that conversation, we began hearing a lot from you about a different understanding of what happened. And there was some really powerful pushback that you have been engaged in. And so if you could help us get a fuller understanding of the record as to what took place in the elections with the DNC, it has been
Yeah.
sort of framed as the boys are fighting, but it feels to me like there is something way more structurally significant happening here. Help us understand what's going on.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I've been prefacing with this point. You know, the truth is immovable, and it doesn't pick sides, but the truth also doesn't defend itself. And I think it's important that, irrespective of what you think about, what he's intending to do or trying to do, it's important that people engage with the facts, that they engage with reality, that they engage with the truth. And I've sat by for a while things have been said that were not true, and frankly, I got sick of hearing that, and it was important to come out and defend the truth and defend the timeline. Listen, I'm as frustrated as anybody by this challenge to my election and to David's election. To be clear, I think the rules were followed. The Credentials Committee disagreed, and they have a role and a responsibility to hear these sort of challenges. But people should understand this timeline. On February the 28th, Kalen Free, one of the candidates who was not successful, filed a challenge. And because the Democratic Party actually does believe in due process, there was a process. And so that was back in February the 28th. Okay. On March the 25th, Chair Martin laid out a plan, which I would love to come back at some point or have the chair come back on at some point to talk about, but the most massive reform to the Democratic Party in the history of the party. A variety of different internal and external reforms that takes the power out of the hands of the chair and gives it back to Democratic voters and to Democratic members of the DNC. You have never had a chair who says, I want less power. But that is what we have in this chair, who understands that a part of his responsibility, to use his phrase, is to democratize the DNC and to get us out of a position where 10 people are making all of the decisions. And we're actually, if we're going to be called the Democrats, we better be fighting for democracy, certainly within our own organization. And that's a part of what his reforms do. As a part of that reform package that he laid out to us, that was on March the 25th, he wanted to expand, and is going to expand the neutrality pledge, and this is based off of a simple principle. I don't believe that the 10 members of the DNC leadership should be picking our nominees. I think we should trust voters to pick our nominees, and then we should do everything that we can as the DNC to to make sure those nominees win. It was not until April 16th that David made clear he was not going to abide by that neutrality pledge. And he has taken those two issues, which happened months before we knew anything about what he was doing, to suggest that those two events were a part of a grand conspiracy to silence his righteous fight to change the DNC. That is just not accurate.